In the late 19th century, one of America's wealthiest women decided she wanted to build something no one had ever quite built before. Not just a museum, but a living work of art in itself. Her name was Isabella Stewart Gardner. Born into wealth and married into even more of it, she spent decades traveling the world, collecting paintings, sculptures, tapestries, and rare objects from Europe and beyond. But Isabella didn't just want to own beautiful things. She wanted to create an experience, a space where every single object was placed exactly, deliberately by her own hand to tell a story. She modeled her museum after a Venetian palazzo, complete with an enclosed courtyard garden that stayed in bloom year-round. When it opened its doors in 1903, Isabella herself arranged every painting, every chair, every curtain. She left explicit instructions that nothing inside should ever be moved, rearranged, or altered after her death. She wanted the museum preserved exactly as she left it, forever, for what she called the education and enjoyment of the public. For decades, her wish was honored, but behind the beauty, the museum quietly began to struggle. After Isabella's death in 1924, funding grew tighter. Maintenance became harder, and critically, security, something that seemed almost like an afterthought in the museum's founding vision, grew increasingly outdated compared to newer institutions being built around the country. By 1990, this wasn't exactly a secret. Word had traveled through Boston's criminal underworld that this beautiful, historic museum, filled with priceless art, was surprisingly poorly protected. It was, as one journalist later put it, something of a sitting duck. The night of March 18, 1990, it was the night after St. Patrick's Day. Boston streets, usually rowdy with celebration, had quieted down. Inside the Gardner Museum, it was an unremarkable Sunday night shift, just 2 security guards on duty, following the same routine they always did. At 1:24 in the morning, the buzzer at the museum's side entrance rang. On the small security monitor, the guard on duty saw 2 men standing outside, dressed in Boston police uniforms. They explained they were responding to a report of a disturbance on the property. It was against museum protocol to let anyone in without proper verification, especially in the middle of the night. But the guard, perhaps trusting the uniforms, perhaps simply not thinking it through, opened the door anyway. It was a decision that would haunt the museum for the next 35 years and counting. The moment the 2 men stepped inside, one of them spoke 4 words that confirmed this was no routine visit. "Gentlemen, this is a robbery." Overpowering the guards, the 2 imposters moved quickly and confidently, suggesting this wasn't their first time planning something like this. They handcuffed both guards and led them down into the museum's basement. There, they bound one guard to a workbench and the other to a nearby pipe, wrapping them tightly with duct tape, thoroughly enough that neither man could break free for hours, regardless of how hard they tried. With the guards completely neutralized, the 2 thieves had the entire museum to themselves, with no alarm sounding and no one to stop them. They moved directly to the museum's 2nd floor, into a gallery known as the Dutch Room, home to some of the most valuable Northern European paintings in the Western Hemisphere. There, they found Johannes Vermeer's The Concert. This single painting alone would have made the heist historic. Vermeer completed fewer than 40 known paintings in his lifetime, and only around 3 dozen survive today. The thieves cut it directly out of its frame. Next, they turned to 2 paintings by Rembrandt van Rijn. Rather than carefully removing them, the thieves smashed the protective glass covering each piece, then sliced the canvases out with a blade, leaving the ornate, gilded frames hanging empty on the wall. One of these was Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, and the only seascape Rembrandt ever painted in his entire career. They also took a self-portrait etching by Rembrandt, 5 delicate sketches by Edgar Degas, and a painting by Edouard Manet. And then came the part of the heist that still puzzles investigators to this day. Alongside these priceless masterpieces, the thieves also took a small, ancient Chinese bronze beaker and an ornamental bronze eagle finial that had once topped a Napoleonic flagpole, an object with real historical value, but nowhere close in worth to a Vermeer or a Rembrandt. Why would professional art thieves, clearly capable of identifying and extracting the most valuable pieces in the building, also bother stealing something so comparatively insignificant? It's a question that remains unanswered. Before leaving, they also removed the videotape from the museum's own security recording system, eliminating any footage of their faces. 81 minutes. From the moment they buzzed the intercom to the moment they carried the final piece out to their car, the entire operation took just 81 minutes, 13 works of art in total. At the time, their combined value was estimated at over $500 million. Adjusted for the art market today, some experts believe the true value could be even higher. It remains, to this day, the largest single property crime ever committed in the history of the United States. Back in the basement, the 2 guards remained handcuffed and bound, completely unable to raise any alarm. They stayed that way for hours. It wasn't until 8:15 the following morning that police finally arrived at the museum and discovered what had happened. That massive gap in time, nearly 7 hours between the theft and its discovery, proved devastating for the investigation. Any trace evidence, any witnesses who might have seen a car leaving in the middle of the night, any chance of an immediate pursuit had already slipped away. Decades of silence. What followed was one of the longest, most expensive art theft investigations in American history. The FBI became involved almost immediately. Over the following decades, agents chased down leads across the country and internationally, following tips from informants, art dealers, and members of organized crime networks who claimed, at various points, to know where the paintings had ended up. None of it led anywhere concrete. No paintings surfaced. No arrests were made. Then in 2013, 23 years after the heist, the FBI made an announcement that shocked the public. Investigators stated they had identified the individuals responsible for the theft, but they refused to release any names. The reasoning was never fully explained to the public. Some speculated it was due to ongoing legal considerations. Others believed it was because those responsible were already deceased, and pursuing formal charges against dead men served no legal purpose. Whatever the reason, the announcement only deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. Years later, Jeff Kelly, the former FBI agent who led the investigation for more than 2 decades, published a detailed account of his work on the case. In his book, he laid out, for the first time publicly, exactly how investigators reached their conclusions, and named the men he personally believed were responsible for planning and carrying out the theft. Amid the investigation, one thread stood out as particularly dark. A man connected to organized crime circles, known in reports simply as Marks, became a person of interest tied to the case. Less than a year after the heist, in February 1991, Marks was found shot to death outside his own apartment in Lynn, Massachusetts. His killer had unscrewed the porch light bulb above the entrance beforehand, ensuring Marks wouldn't see the attack coming. He was shot twice in the back of the head, a method investigators immediately recognized as bearing the hallmarks of an organized crime execution. That murder, much like the art heist itself, remains completely unsolved. Today, walk into the Gardner Museum's Dutch room and you'll see something unusual. The gilded frames that once held the Vermeer and the 2 Rembrandts still hang on the walls, empty. The museum made a deliberate choice decades ago never to fill them with replacement art. Museum staff describe the empty frames not as symbols of loss, but as symbols of hope, a quiet promise to visitors that one day the real paintings might finally come home to the exact spots Isabella Stewart Gardner herself once chose for them. The reward. To this day, the museum offers a $10 million reward for information leading to the safe recovery of the stolen artwork, the largest reward ever offered by a private institution in American history. A separate, smaller reward of $100,000 remains specifically tied to the return of that strange Napoleonic eagle finial, where things stand today. More than 3.5 decades after that night in March 1990, not a single one of the 13 stolen masterpieces has ever been recovered. No one has ever been formally charged with the crime. Despite a Netflix documentary series, a widely popular investigative podcast, thousands of public tips, and a continuous, active FBI investigation that persists to this day, the location of over $500 million in stolen art remains completely unknown. Somewhere the real Vermeer, the real Rembrandts, the real Degas sketches may still exist, carefully hidden, quietly traded through underground networks, or perhaps destroyed entirely and lost forever. No one knows. What we do know is this. On one ordinary Sunday night in Boston, 2 men walked into a museum wearing stolen authority and walked out 81 minutes later with pieces of human history that the world has never seen again. Production note: this is a real, unsolved 1990 crime. The 2 thieves were never identified publicly, despite the FBI's 2013 claim to know who they were. So they are shown only as generic figures in police-style uniforms/costumes, faces obscured or unremarkable, never as specific, real-named individuals. All restraint of the guards is shown non-graphically, tape, rope visuals, no violence beyond being bound. No physical harm occurs in this case, so tension comes from atmosphere, tension, and heist thriller pacing, rather than horror. Color grade, warm golden amber tones for Isabella's era and the museum's beauty, shifting to cold blue-black night tones for the heist itself. Then a desaturated, grey-blue investigative tone for the decades-long aftermath.